Hey, thanks for joining us for a very special episode of Disclosure. This is our second ever Bullpen episode. Now, if you have no idea what the Bullpen is, it's just a bunch of guys in the studio talking about the world of religion. And the reason we do it is, well, there's just not that much for men in the world of modern Western religion, or at least I suspect a lot of men feel that way. So what we do in the Bullpen is get together a bunch of regular guys. We climb up into our treehouse. We put out a sign that says no girls allowed, and we talk about faith. And we talk about religion and current events from a decidedly Christian point of view. I don't make any bones about that. And we talk about stuff from a decidedly male perspective, and I don't apologize for that either, because one of the biggest missing demographics in North American Christianity is men. And I know some of you are thinking, no, that's not true. Come to my church. We're about 50-50 male and female. And I'll challenge you. You're thinking that right now, but next weekend, go and do a head count at church. And I think you'll be in for a bit of a surprise. Anybody that I've challenged to do that before comes back and says, wow, we're like 3-to-1 female to male, or 5-to-1. One person came back and said, we've got 5 women for every man. Men are missing from church, and so we're going to talk about religion with guys, for guys. And along those lines, our topic today is probably going to surprise some of you, but I promise it's not going to surprise most of the men who are listening, because a lot of men are going to know that what we're saying is true. Our topic today is, why do men hate church? And joining me in studio today is Joel Baker, Kyle Warren, and Palmer Halverson, all guys who work 9-to-5 jobs, or I guess 7-to-6 or 7-to-9 jobs, or maybe we should reverse the numbers. You guys work 5-to-9 jobs here at the Voice of Prophecy, and you all have families and you all go to church. So guys, let's, did you hear my voice squeak when I said, why do men hate church? I went way up at the end there.
Yeah, that was a Seanism.
That's a Seanism. Yeah, we have to pretty much.
It's for emphasis.
For emphasis, it's my Mr. Haney. I think that's the second. That'll live in infamy, that why do men hate church? That's why, because our pronunciation of stuff goes out the window. Hey guys, lay it on me. Why do you think men hate church? Silence. We hate radio too.
Well, I think it kind of goes along with, actually, I think it's the psychology of also why men don't like to ask for directions.
Tell me more.
So we don't like to be followers. We want to lead, and we want to be self-sufficient. So when you go to church, actually, you're learning pretty quickly that you need God and you're not self-sufficient.
Well, wait a minute. I like asking for directions.
Well,
I'm the first to pull in somewhere and ask for directions.
Yeah, I ask directions too. I don't want to waste my time.
No, I was lying, Kyle. But
No,
now we've outed
I'm not.
you as a direction asker.
No, it's
You
fine.
do. You pull over and ask for directions?
I don't know what
No,
it is,
I don't
though.
have to anymore. I've got a phone.
Well, yeah, phones help, but I don't know what it is. But there's definitely something, at least in my psychology, that says, okay, I'm going to sort this out. I'm going to solve it myself.
I'm going to solve it as right. You don't
Yeah.
call a plumber until you have to, until the house is full of water.
Yeah,
And then you admit that. Because
come see my floor in my house.
I screwed this up.
Have you wrecked your floor?
Yeah, I've got to fix it.
What'd you do to your floor?
So he's not going to call a guy to come fix his floor. He's like,
Well,
I'm
I tried
doing
to
this
fix the
myself.
dishwasher by myself, and I messed up something. The water leaked out and ruined my hardwood floor, so I've got to fix my floor. And you're laughing.
Yeah, I am laughing because I would totally try and fix a dishwasher myself too.
But I do think it goes along with the psychology that we don't want to be followers. We want to be leading, and we want to be self-sufficient. So when we go to church, and this is, I think, not necessarily, I mean, I think it's human psychology, but the church reminds us that we're not self-sufficient, that we need God, we need something. And I think in men, sometimes we say, we're going to take care of ourselves.
I think you've got a point there, because in Christianity in particular, there is an element of submission. There's an element of, you have to confess that you're wrong. I mean, that's the first step in a Christian experience, is admitting that you're wrong, and most guys don't like to admit that. I mean, even after I've gotten that thing from IKEA and assembled it completely wrong, I'm right. Right? Yeah. There's no floor in the crib, but I'm right.
It still works.
It still
it's
works.
Fine.
Yeah,
Put the baby in there.
Is he right, Joel?
Yeah, I think a lot of men. It's a loaded question because there's a lot of history. Everyone has a different story, but I think men kind of have their own religion, and that's masculinity in their mind.
Right.
And that's being tough, and everything they see when they look at church. That's kind of like, I think some men. Many men look at church as kind of the women's religion for the women and the children, and if they go there, and also like non-masculine men, I think Men who think they're masculine men look at men who go to church as non-masculine men.
Right.
So they're going to avoid anything that calls their manliness into question. And for a lot of men, that's going to church. They're just not going to go.
What's the stuff that happens in church that doesn't seem masculine?
Yeah, I'm not holding hands here.
No. Well, that one drives me nuts. I'll be honest, and I bet you half the men listening today is like, yeah, when they sing one of those songs where everybody's supposed to hold hands at the end, I hate it. And one of the reasons I hate it is that, like when I hold hands with my wife, my hand goes on top. I don't know if you've ever paid attention to how you hold hands. But now you're in church and you're next to some dude and they want you to hold hands. Who gets the dominant position in that handhold?
Yeah.
I mean, I
Where
don't
do
wanna
you
be
go to church? Because it's been a long time since I've been asked to hold hands with somebody in church.
Oh, no, it happens all the time, man.
Really?
Let's
Okay.
all gather in a circle. Everybody stand up and
The
hold
big
hands
circle.
before we... Oh, the big circle
Oh,
in church.
man. Yeah.
You
everybody-
haven't seen the big circle in church?
It's been a long time, but I have.
I think it's
yeah.
happening less and less.
Yeah, it
and
is
there's a
happening
reason
less.
for that.
Yeah.
I think
Because nobody likes to hold
I think,
hands.
Sean, to touch on it, I think that one of the desired outcomes is being vulnerable.
Yeah.
To express your feelings, as you just discussed, through discussion and prayer and songs, and we don't want to do that. We don't want to be vulnerable.
No, what's the alternative, though? I mean, I know that as a kid, I grew up in a Christian home, and then I kind of ran wild for a bit. But during my wild years, I'd darken the church door once in a while and bring one of my buddies with me. And it never lasted long because being vulnerable, sharing your feelings, all these things are going down. It's like, I don't want to go there with you anymore, Sean.
Yeah, I know people, they want to get into the emotional side of stuff, and I'm like, I don't want to touch that. No thanks.
Well-
I like black and white answers. I'm not here to get touchy feely.
Exactly. I think the point is a lot of us don't want to get into our feelings. We want to do things. We want to be active. We want to pursue a goal or a task, and we just don't want to sit there and stew on our feelings.
Well, that brings up the whole subject of men's ministries. I think that a lot of churches are recognizing that men are basically missing from church, and so they're trying to reach out, how do we get men to come to church? And they put on a men's ministries program. But I've been to some of those men's ministries programs, and they still drive me nuts. Even though it's a bunch of guys in a room, it still seems to underline a lot of things that were driving me nuts about the church service in the first place. Let's all sit in a circle. Let's discuss things. Let's talk about how we feel. And I don't know too many guys that want to do that want to sit in a circle and to discuss how they feel.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, how many times in the Bullpen have you saying, "Oh, this this next weekend, or we're gonna have a pancake breakfast for the men," and then if we go, what do we all talk about? We're talking about football. We're talking about all the things that interest us naturally. Someone has to literally stand up in front of the group and drive the conversation.
Right. Now it's time for a devotional, guys.
Right.
Yeah, let's force this in there.
I think that a lot of men's ministries just miss the point. I mean, I think men are psychologically wired to take risks, be challenged, to conquer and adapt our surroundings. And we bond through shared experiences, not through conversations.
I think that's a really valid point. The conversation drives me nuts. And when some guy's starting to open up and tell me it's like, oh, let's go do something instead. I think you're absolutely right about that. And a lot of men's ministries they try to gather men in a room, and then they do what they did at the women's ministries meeting.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think if you take a look at some of the, I'm dipping into the military aspect, but if you take a look at the highest code of respect and honor for men, it's earned through shared and observed achievements and experiences that are shared.
I think that's fascinating. When you get a bunch of guys together, what do they talk about? They're not talking about how they all felt that time that we were all, like, some of us have been on road trips together filming, and what we talk about is not how we felt during that trip. Wow, I really felt really close to all of you. And you're laughing, but if somebody said, well, there were 6 of us crammed in a car, but if a guy said, I really felt really close to all of you guys, it's awkward. It's like, oh.
Now you've broken it.
Now you ruined it.
That's right. Get out of the car.
But what we talk about is, hey, do you remember that time? And that time
exactly.
will always be. Remember that time we blew out a tire on the side of the road and Joel disappeared up the mountain? And
Yeah, we totally bond through shared experiences, not through discussions and conversations.
No. So how does that show up in church? How do we do that in church? I mean, I can think of one place that I think is doing it well. It'll be unnamed, but it happens to be in Canada. We have 2 Canadians at the table, and this church has a men's ministries where they don't sit around and yabber. They yabber. See, look at the contempt in which I hold sitting around and sharing your feelings. It's yabbering. They go out and do things. They'll go and fix a home for an elderly couple that can't fix their home anymore. They'll go re-roof it on a Sunday afternoon or or they go out and fix a car for a single mom, and guys sort of, really enjoy that.
Yeah, that kind of stuff makes more sense to me.
Yeah.
Because you're accomplishing something, and at the end of the day, you go, hey, we did a good thing. That, I can feel good about that, and I feel good that I went around and, did it with you guys.
Yeah, so what's the most uncomfortable thing that you remember ever happening to you in church? Now, don't share your feelings. Just tell me what happened. I don't care how you felt about it. I just asked you to open up and share your feelings on microphones, but there's something there. Nothing. Look at the silence. This is the problem with men's ministries breakfast.
No, so this takes me back to actually this was in a church event, but actually I mean maybe you're not getting the answer you want, but I was helping out my dad with some AV stuff, and I was sitting on a table, and I was trying to help him film some stuff, and my chair, I sat it on a table to get some height. All right. So guess what happened? The chair leg got to the edge of the table. I went flying off, and all of a sudden the attention in the whole room was on me. That's the most uncomfortable thing I've had happen. And I think maybe that goes back to the psychology of men. We don't want to be put on the spot in a group.
Yeah, I have a similar story. My dad's sitting there running the AV stuff, and I'm maybe 9. And he goes, I see that the lights on the stage, something's not right. Go over and flip that light switch off.
Oh, no.
And so I go over to the church, to the wall, slam the light switch down, all the lights in the church, boom. And then everybody just turns straight towards me. I'm like, well, that wasn't right. So you just flip on the light switch and you run out of church as fast as you can. I'm done here.
Yeah, I don't think we often, like to get in the spotlight. I mean, some guys do, but we,
there are some.
That makes us a bit nervous, when all the attention is on us. My worst experience was, I was encouraged as a young man to be musical, and I played the trumpet. And so it's like, oh, well, of course you're going to play in church. I like playing in school. I didn't really like playing in church for some reason. That was a different dynamic.
Why?
Made me nervous.
What was different about it?
I'm not exactly sure, but I definitely know there was a difference. Playing in the band for school and playing in church was different, but you're always expected to. So we went on a mission trip to the Philippines. They said, oh, Joel, you got to take your trumpet. Okay, take my trumpet. I get up in front of, the churches in the Philippines with several hundred at least.
Yeah, 18 million people.
Pushing 1,000, easy. Brand new church, beautiful building. I'm up front. Somehow, on a trumpet, you have the valves, and the valves need oil. So you always keep a tube of oil in your trumpet case. Somehow this thing got jammed up the bell of my trumpet just before I went up on stage. So I'm up there trying to blast out a song. And I never tried this before with the oil up the bell of the trumpet, but it basically changes all the notes. So everything is off key. It was the worst thing anyone, and they're all saying amen and everything, probably make me feel good, or maybe the Lord worked a miracle and they heard something beautiful. But, you go through those experiences, and it makes it very hard to want to do that again, to be a part of church again.
Yeah, the old theme song for The Voice of Prophecy was "Lift Up the Trumpet, Now Forever," and that's kind of, you hear the music in the background. There's just a hint, a nod to that in this song, and now every time I hear that, I'm going to think about you with the oil jammed up the bell of your trumpet. So, were you glad when it was over, or?
I ran out of there.
Ran out of there. All right, we got to take a break. We're talking about why do guys hate church, and we're going to dig in a little bit deeper and share our feelings after we come back from this break and open up and bare our souls. We'll be right back.
Disclosure is just one of the programs brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy, like the audio adventure program Discovery Mountain. Discovery Mountain is a weekly Bible-based program for kids of all ages and backgrounds. Your family will enjoy faith-building stories with Jake Donovan, Mr. Simon, and others in this small mountain town. Each summer, campers visit Discovery Mountain, where they sing songs, learn about God, and reenact a Bible story with the help of drama teachers Miss Wendy and Miss Tamara. With 24 full episodes every year and programming every week, your family will have something uplifting to listen to every week. Listen to episodes on demand and watch video features from Director Doug at discoverymountain.com or on your favorite podcast platform. That's discoverymountain.com.
And we are back from the break. My name is Sean Boonstra. You are listening to The Bullpen, a special episode of Disclosure from the good folks at the Voice of Prophecy. Our topic today is why do men hate church? And I think there's some truth to that around the world. Guys in the studio are Joel Baker, Kyle Warren, Palmer Halverson, and during the break we were all sort of taking our masks off and sharing our feelings and holding hands a little bit. And they're all laughing because guys don't typically do that. Guys, I dug into this a little bit, and I found out there are people actually engaged in studies on why we can't get men to church. And men are missing, particularly middle-aged guys are missing from church. And they trace it all the way back to the Civil War, the American Civil War. After the war, a lot of guys had to go away to work. And so they're missing. They went to mines, they went into forestry, they went to work on the railroad or any of those different occupations. And when they came back, their wives have been running the church, and they discovered, wow, there's doilies in the sanctuary now, and the core values had shifted. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but the core values had shifted kind of in the direction of more feminine virtues and tastes. So the things that were emphasized were connectedness, security, nurture, and those kinds of things. And I think I heard somebody say before, several of you say, men don't want to feel connected and nurtured. We want to do things. And that was missing. So guys stopped attending as frequently as they did because the only thing they saw there when they came back home were women and children. I think, Joel, you were saying, and you know, the feeble guys or the old guys, and there's nothing here for me. And because they were absent, then the feminine virtues got even more entrenched, and it's been that way now since I guess going on 200 years almost, 150, 170 years, somewhere in that bracket, to the point where during the Second Great Awakening, if you read the writings of the great evangelists like Charles Finney and some of the others, they would say, look, your goal is to get the woman of the house, because if we can get her into the church, she'll drag her husband there against his will. I thought, this has been going on for a long time. So, feminine virtues in church, connectedness. Do you find that? Do you find when you get to church that it emphasizes things that your wife might appreciate more than you?
I think for sure. I mean, you look at we've got 2 kids, and you go in, and one of the big things is, do they have good kids programs to
that'd be
nurture
important.
the kid?
Yeah.
And it's important, but those children's programs are all run by women.
Yeah.
Well,
are you volunteering to run it?
Not these.
No, I'd be useless. I mean, I remember one time I got called in to speak to a kindergarten class. I thought, this would be a softball. I'll go talk to the kid. I'll talk about one of my adventures, and I'd gone up to the Arctic, and so I brought in all my Arctic gear. And the 5-year-olds I've discovered are the toughest audience in the world. There was no way I could break through to them. They were sitting there with their arms folded, scowls on their faces, and I'm breaking a cold sweat. So I'm not interested in doing the children's department at all anymore because I'm terrified of those little tykes.
My brother actually does some of the junior type stuff, but he doesn't. He goes through prophecy, things that are more tangible, I think, than just kind of the emotions or whatever that people want to be talking about.
Emotion is a big one, right? How many of you are comfortable sharing your emotions in church?
Not.
No. How many of you are comfortable sharing your emotions in the studio? Joel, you're all clammed up. Tell us how you're feeling.
Yeah, that's difficult.
Yeah. It makes you uncomfortable because that's another way that I think we get put on the spot, and it's just kind of like, I'm not here for that. Thanks, though.
Going back to this idea of men's ministries, and Joel, you had a thought, but I was just going to say that, okay, men do actually share their feelings, but under what circumstances and how? Like, I could see a men's ministry where you go out and you do a whole bunch of stuff, you do some crazy stuff, you earn the respect of other people through shared achievements and doing things, and then you can sit down and you can start to express maybe how you feel, but there's this trust that's developed after you do some of those activities. And without that, you're not going to share your feelings. You don't want to share your feelings with people you don't, quote, trust. I think that's an aspect too.
Well, what are we afraid of they're going to do with it, I guess, is I'm not going to make myself vulnerable because in the man's world, making yourself vulnerable is stupid. They're going to use that against you one day. Do you think that's part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, though, for example, if you do and achieve, and
Right.
Again, if a men's ministry, you're off, whatever it happens to be, fishing, hunting, whatever you're doing now, men's ministries maybe do some of those things, maybe not. But when you're done doing those things, you've already proven that you're a man. So you can come back and you can talk about maybe a few feelings, and there's a balance there maybe.
I don't know. I think the feelings that I share my feelings, but I'm sitting here analyzing myself as you're talking, Palmer, because there are feelings I have no problem sharing. Irritation, anger, those kinds of things. And is there too much emphasis on, do you ever feel, guys, that the way that church is run, that it's following, how do I put this? Well, that the virtues that are presented, the values that are presented are so feminine that they're almost discouraging masculinity?
I think that there's something maybe to that, but I think it also goes along with kind of what we're seeing in outside the church. There's a lot of discouragement of masculinity, and I think a lot of guys, they have these these masculine needs or whatever you want to call it, but those things are being told, that's not something you should be expressing. And then when you get into church, it's like, well, this is definitely not the place for me to be expressing my masculinity,
But why? Is it, when I open my Bible, I don't see a discouragement of masculine traits, not at all. So why is it discouraged in church? Do you think it's because we're mirroring the culture since, like, say, the 60s? I know that growing up I won't say when I grew up. I actually never did grow up. As most men don't. But I was reared largely in the 70s, and as we got into the 80s, I distinctly felt that they were discouraging masculinity altogether. And they weren't using the term toxic masculinity yet, but we were being told that being aggressive is wrong always. Mm-hmm. Being assertive is wrong always. Has that trickled into church?
Yeah.
How do you feel, man?
Yeah. Well,
nothing's more awkward than a men's show.
I think that there's actually some truth to feminism affecting the church, but I think the church started to change before the feminine movement as well. And I think you addressed it earlier in the Civil War. So from my perspective, I was thinking about this and some of the talking points that we had. And I think church used to be or should be a place to energize the faithful to go out and change their community, right? To make a difference. And now it's more of a club with an internal focus. And, in the war metaphor, I'm saying to myself, okay, so we got 3 locations that you operate in spiritually. The headquarters, which is your church, the foxhole, which is your home, and the battlefield, which is your community, right? And I think we spend far too much time of our spiritually focused time in location 1, the headquarters, probably not enough at 2 in our foxhole, but clearly not enough at 3. And so we spend a lot of time in headquarters just discussing stuff, laying plans, playing it safe, solving internal issues, but we want to be out in the battlefield doing something.
What you point out is interesting. I saw a study last week that noticed, and this is going to drive some people nuts, but it noticed that when men take an active role in the church, and quite often now in a lot of churches in North America, the pastor is about the only masculine leader in the church, and every other department is run by women. What they've noticed is when men start running the departments, or there's a preponderance of men on the church board, suddenly the church starts to grow. And I know that'll drive some people nuts, but I wonder if it's not goal-oriented. Let's go out and conquer this. Jesus said, go make disciples, so let's go out there and do that. Let's go and conquer the community.
Yeah, and I think one of the ways that you do that is not through just, Jesus didn't just go out there and go, all right, here's the good news. I mean, he went out and he met people's needs where they were. And I think when we do that, that endears people. Or if you go out and you're building or you're doing something to people's homes, there's people that's a lot easier for me to get involved with than to sit down and start going over doctrinal things and telling you why, whatever we're doing at our church is the way you should believe. It's a lot easier to find common ground when I'm working on someone's house, fixing someone's car or whatever.
What would make men more likely to want to go to church? I mean, what kinds of changes would take place? I know me. I'm a preacher, and I'm going to openly admit there's a lot of things about a church service that drive me nuts. I like sitting at the back of the room because that's about as close to holding the remote control as you can get, because you're kind of in control about, I think, Palmer, you mentioned that. We don't like surprises. We don't want to be exposed or left open. And sitting at the back means I'm holding the remote. If this gets really awkward, I can get up and slip out the back door. Yeah.
Well, also, there's something in male psychology, I guess unrelated maybe to your point, but I know when I go to a restaurant and I'm sitting down somewhere, I'm finding a spot where I can observe things and where I can see what's going on. And I think it's in male psychology. It's part of being a protection and a provider.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead, Joel.
Well, another thing too, when you're a young child and you're in the different classes, or as an adult you're in church, one thing I think a lot of men feel that they might be called upon. You're going to be called out. You're going to be expected to know certain things, and especially as you're coming into a church, that can terrify you. So the back of the class is a safe zone because you're less likely to be called on back there. And I think the problem there is a lot of men aren't spending the time in the Word at home.
Right.
So all week there's a drought at home in their spiritual life, and then they go to church and it's like, oh, I'm not ready for this.
And they get called on.
Right. And so, and that's terrifying to a man who wants to be a provider and wants to have knowledge on certain. He knows everything about the football game and everything about the news and everything else, but he goes to church and all of a sudden he's put on the spot, and that is not a comfortable position to be in.
Going back to your question, what would make men more comfortable in church? I've been in different churches and seen different things. The one I'm in now, it's bang, bang, bang. You're in, you're out. There's not a whole lot of.
So less church, Kyle.
Well, no,
less church would be the.
No, I enjoy the teaching part of church, but the whole part where we're trying to get this emotional swelling thing through a long, musical service and that kind of stuff. I'm just kind of like, oh, come on, let's get this puppy going, man.
I think you touched on something there, and maybe this isn't a male-female thing, but I tend to not enjoy what's going on in a lot of churches in North America is the praise time. Like, we're going to sing choruses for half an hour, and a lot of those choruses sound like love songs. You could just swap out the name of Jesus and you're singing to your boyfriend. And that, I don't know, I find some of that awkward and too emotional. Look at us. We're going to get letters. You guys are repressed. You are repressed. Yes, maybe we are, but we're also men.
I think it goes back to something I've observed actually with my boys, and I think it's in psychology today. It's kind of a common thought. Not everybody's addressing it, but just look at the educational system. So you set your boys down in school. They're 5 or 6 years old. They're sitting there, and actually they don't perform as well at that age in school as the girls do. Why? Because they're fidgety. Because their attention span's a little shorter. They want to actively, physically do something. And I think there's part of us as men that we never lose that trait. We want to, we have a limited span where we want to just sit down in one spot and do something. And I think if we have the right kind of mental stimulation, maybe that'll be better. But I think a lot of times in church, I think Joel hit a great point that if we're spiritually weak during the week, we're not going to be spiritually focused and have patience to actually listen to a spiritual thought in church. So I think there's an aspect of that. But I also think that how long the service is and what you're focusing on is also an issue.
Yeah, I think that's true. I hear we need recess in church. So we can run out. We
exactly.
can go outside like your boys, run around, kick a ball around, and then come back in after 10 minutes.
Sure.
Recess in church. We're going to put that out to the National Council of Evangelicals, and we'll just send it to the World Council of Churches. We need recess in church. I think that would be actually, that's not a bad idea at all. I hear the music. That means we're out of time for this segment. We're going to take a little break. I want you to take advantage of this offer from the good folks at the Voice of Prophecy. Listen carefully, write down the information, and then we'll be right back with the Bullpen and why men hate church.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions? Like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers that you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter the most to you. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
And here we are in the Bullpen, third quarter. And that means that, I guess we've rounded second base. We're headed for third. If this was a golf game, I don't know where we'd be. Where would we be if we're 3/4 of the way through, 3/4 out
I
of
don't
18?
play golf
or like,
enough.
Hole 12.
Sandpit.
Hole 12. We're on hole 12. During the break, we had a rather animated discussion about praise time in church. Joel, you were raising something interesting about the praise time. Now, maybe if you go to kind of a mainline church, I think a lot of churches do this, even the mainline churches, where praise time, if you're not familiar with that, it's where you sort of have a group of people up front and they sing these choruses for about, I don't know, anywhere from 22 minutes to an hour and 20 minutes, it feels like sometimes.
It's the same thing over and over.
Yeah. Joel, you were saying during the break.
Well, I was just, Kyle was mentioning earlier, that he wasn't moved by music as much. He wanted to get, let's get down to business. Let's have the speaking. And that, I totally get that. But it made me think church is really, it's catering to men and it's catering to women. And we're both moved differently by different things. My wife, she loves the music time, the hymns, praise time. She's often more moved spiritually and emotionally during that time than she is during the sermon. I'm the opposite. I'm just waiting for the praise time to end like Kyle is so we can get down to the good stuff. And sometimes the children's story does more for me than the music. So, it's an interesting situation.
Well, and one of the things that we were talking about is I think the difference between the praise music and the hymns, because the hymns are, it seems like there's a story encapsulated in those. And the way I personally feel about the praise music is, okay, I sing one verse and then I sing the chorus 15 times until we've reached whatever state of euphoria that we need to reach. And now we're up onto the second verse.
Yeah, it's supposed to be drawing in your emotions.
Yeah, and
it
works.
is.
Yeah, it does that for a lot of people. But I just sit there and I go, man, is this the way that God wants to be worshipped? I don't know.
Well,
That's my personal.
I think the lyrics drive me nuts in a lot of those songs, because guys sing. We don't hate music. You turn on a pop radio station or a country music station, and we're singing a lot of the same types of songs. But here's the difference. We're singing those to girls. And then you take the same types of lyrics and you put them in church, and now I'm singing those same lyrics to Jesus. And there is something there that doesn't quite mesh. If you listen to a lot of the and I have no issue with contemporary songs. Generally speaking, they all shake out. 30 years from now, we'll know which ones were winners because they'll still be around, and 95% of them will go on the slough pile. That's always happened. But if you look at a lot of them, they're very thinly veiled love songs. They sound like top 40 love songs. And I don't know. I don't sing to another guy like that. I just don't.
Well, I think there's another aspect, too, that actually bothers me, and it came to me during the break as well, and that is that I'm all for having professional musicians in church leading out. I'm all for people who can sing well up front. But,
amen.
But here's the thing. No, but we've gotten to this place where it really, really is a performance.
It's a
And
production.
it's so much of a performance and a production that as a common person sitting in the pew, it's like, okay, I'm just going to listen to them. I don't really want to sing and participate with this. Well, number one, because of all the things we've just mentioned, the type of songs, the lyrics in those songs, but it's become a big performance. And so I sit back there in the pew, and I'll admit, okay, I probably sing a third of the time in church because, again, I think for me, and maybe I'm old school, but the hymns have a lot more value to them with the lyrics. And I really, they stir my emotion much better than these other songs. And I mean, I don't want to be anti-progressive, so yeah, let's bring on some new songs. I like some new content, but I think the praise time is too long, and I think it's too much of a performance.
Yeah. So is it distinctly then, is that a masculine thing? I think it is. I think that we want action, and that feels like inactivity when that goes on for 25 minutes and we're not participating.
Yeah, if I'm just sitting there watching somebody sing, I can do this at home.
Exactly.
Just turn on YouTube.
Well, you tend to be passive,
right? But if I know that there's only 2 songs in the service that I go to, if there's only 2 songs, this is my chance to sing. I'm going to sing whatever it is we're singing, out of the hymnal or whatever it is. I'm going to participate with that, and we don't have 15 people leading up on stage because that does feel like more of a performance to me, and I'm here to watch. I think we've been cultured or whatever, where you watch these people and you go, oh, this is my time to be quiet and let them perform.
It's funny that you guys bring up praise time, or maybe Joel did. Some of the studies I've looked at as to why men hate church, they all identify this one. And it's kind of a mixed bag because on the one hand, now they put the lyrics up on the screen and I don't have to get all that involved. It's really easy. We've made it easy for me. But on the other hand, not participating drives men nuts. And that because we don't want to just sit there and be told, we want to do.
Well, going back to the lyrics on the screen thing, when I grew up in church, you're sitting there looking at a hymnal, and at some point, the notes and the words and how everyone is singing it all clicks together. When I'm looking at it up on the stage, there's people in the praise band that don't even know how the song goes, and they're all kind of we're supposed to do this now, I'm sorry guys, I forgot.
And then there's a question whether the guy running PowerPoint is actually keeping up with what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's not very hard when all the slides look the same.
That's true. Yeah, but how many times have we sang this one verse? Am I supposed to click it now?
But I think there's a real point to what we're saying, and that is that maybe the length of time is actually one of these critical factors. I think, so what's the purpose? I guess for men, maybe, Joel, from what you're saying with your wife, she loves praise time. She could probably enjoy 40 minutes of praise time. For me, 2 or 3 songs, if they're good songs, if I have a hymn and a couple songs, I'm done with praise time. I'm ready to move on. Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah.
And one more interesting thing.
I'm laughing because I'm so there.
Yeah. I mean, I don't need a half an hour praise time.
Right. One interesting thing, though, that we have in common, and I've noticed in this conversation, and me and my wife have had this conversation, she is more moved and engaged with the hymns than the praise time as well.
Interesting.
So that's probably not for everybody, but that's just an interesting
You guys are old. You're all old.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Although I think I'm the oldest. Am I the oldest in the room?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh no!
Get off my porch.
Yeah. Get off my porch.
But here's what's happening. So sitting in the service, I'm saying to myself, okay, so we've done our discussion in the morning. We're gonna the 10 or 9 service, and then we're gonna come to the 11 o'clock, 10:30 service, and we're gonna go in here. And there's a lot of preliminaries. And I understand why churches need to have a couple of announcements. Thankfully, church I attend is like, okay, we're going to do 3 points for the announcement period, and that's all. But I think there's far too preliminaries because you're waiting for the service to start, the sermon to start, and you're hoping that it's going to stimulate you intellectually, and that there's going to be some level of conviction, and then you can go home with something you can apply in your life. And it needs to be practical.
And again, you want to do something.
Yeah, you want to do something. It needs to be practical. You want to take something away that you can actually apply in your life in the next week. And I think there's a lot of sermons that it's more theoretical. I don't mind a good intellectual thought, but I think it's too theoretical. It's not practical enough.
I think, to go along with that, a lot of the times that the place that I get the most blessing in church is actually the Sabbath school that takes place before the church service. And the way our Sabbath school is set up, we have a leader, moderator, or whatever, and she's just kind of asking some good questions, and boom, we just go, and 40 minutes later, and we're reading the Bible, we're reading, good books and stuff like that. And then when we're done, I come away blessed.
If you're sitting in a Sunday school or Sabbath school, and what's your preference? Would you rather have a lecture on the topic, or would you rather have a discussion?
No, I prefer a discussion, hands down.
Well, you guys aren't men.
Yeah, but the things. No. Here's the thing. When we're talking about we're talking about a piece of text or a piece of the Bible that we've read, we've ingested.
Right.
And this is the way that I respond to this thing. Reading the Bible, it's not I don't know. I can't say it's not a girly book, but it's not a.
Oh no.
No, it's very masculine. The things that happen in the Bible are very raw.
Right.
Put it that way.
Sean, I think that, at least for me, I don't mind. Sitting here having this discussion, I don't mind having discussion all day long. It depends on the topic. Like if we're supposed to, share our feelings and express some things and go deep into our psychology, there's a problem. If we want to discuss and argue topics and issues and things that are important to us, I'll do it all day long.
Right.
Yeah, that's
it just
easy.
depends. It just depends on what the topic is.
It's the same thing with
sports,
religion.
politics, whatever it happens to be. We can kind of have a verbal,
Do you know what I find interesting about this is that church attendance is 3-to-1 up to 5-to-1, women to men, and yet Christianity's forever under the microscope. It's a patriarchy, and yet men don't go there because it doesn't seem masculine, and so that raises a whole bunch of questions. Well, how do you make it more appealing to men? Other studies have indicated that women wouldn't mind masculinizing the church service if it meant their husband would want to go. They are more willing to give than men would be willing to give the other direction.
I think. When you look at the Bible, the man is supposed to be the head of the household and the priest in the home. And if the men aren't coming to church or they're not learning how to do this, it's like there's been something that's been put inside of us that's not being fulfilled.
But But is there an element there where we've been told not to be leaders?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
We're too wild. We have to be tamed.
Yeah, I think that's true. Who was the author that put out a book a while ago, Wild at Heart? That was a great book. I thought, oh, finally. John Eldredge, yeah. And I'm not going to argue whether or not his theology was sound all the way through that book. That's not the point. I read that thinking, boom, man, this guy gets it. We were born with a spark in our heart to do something great. And if you look at the original marching orders in Genesis, I don't know if Eldredge brings this up or not, but I've noticed this. Go and subdue the whole earth. Man, that rings my bell. Go subdue the whole earth is not get in touch with your feminine side.
Yeah, those are marching orders.
I think there's
conquer for that.
There's multiple factors, though, in men in church, and we're talking mostly about North America. I think really, actually, to be a Christian, actually, if you're going to go all in, is a daring proposition.
Sure
and
is,
I don't think that we're daring anymore with our faith in North America. And I think society as a whole has actually put men on a shelf and say we don't need them.
You know what? I think you're right there. And daring is right. If you look at historical Christianity, you had to be willing to die for it. And a lot of people did. In the early Roman Empire, the guys who showed up might get fed to the lions, literally.
So I guess the question is how we can apply this to, let's say our local church. But I think that there's a whole aspect of men, the traits, the unique gender traits that God gave us are not being valued across the board. And, you go back to the turn of the century and you had ranching, farming, mining, homesteading. The majority of men were very active in those roles, and their unique traits were highly valuable. You couldn't exist in the Old West without those traits. And now, we're doing less. So there's less action, less challenge, and we get bored and we check out.
Yeah, it's true.
What is there left for us to do?
Then it becomes cyclical, doesn't it? Because once we check out, then we're not there.
Yeah.
And then the core values at the church tend to shift even more in a feminine direction.
Yeah, and we touched on something interesting really earlier, and that's, the lessons for the kids, the classes. They're all being taught by women, because we've checked out. And so everything the kids are learning is from the female perspective, and part of that is fine, but they're not getting the male side at all, which I think it makes a huge difference. I remember as a child, I had one teacher who was a guy, and his stories, to this day, I remember all of that because it was such a contrast and a difference.
It fired your soul.
It did. It really made a difference, and all these years later, I remember it. So I think men do need to step back up and step into those positions to start making the difference.
Now, I remember a little boy that I met in church years ago, and he loved his Bible stories, and he would run around his house with a plastic sword. What are you doing? I'm slaying Goliath. That's what I'm doing. I'm slaying Goliath.
Exactly.
And he never, ever rehearsed you need to be kind because he's 5 years old. No, he wants to slay Goliath. That's how you get a boy's attention. I hear the music. We're going to come back, and we're going to talk a little bit about what should church look like, because obviously I don't think we're arguing that it should be a man cave either, but what kinds of changes could be made so that maybe men would feel a little more comfortable dropping by church. And we'll talk about Jesus, too. Let's be right back in a minute.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
And here we are in the fourth quarter of the Bullpen. We are talking about why do men hate church, and during the break, again, you guys get all animated during the break, and you let loose with what you were really thinking and feeling. And I know Kyle he shed a few tears and got in touch with his feminine side during the break.
That's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
I'm doubting that.
No. Well, we shed tears, but that's the interesting thing is we would never do that. I cry, but it'll never happen in front of you, if I can help it. And I don't know. We are more guarded. One of you raised a point, though, about men are not just missing from church; you're missing from the home in a lot of cases as well. Who was talking about that?
No, I was.
Yeah, go ahead, Kyle.
Yeah, so I think you can look, and from the 60s on, there's a lot of men missing from the home, and as that line of broken families and broken households and stuff, you see the woman is actually having to take both the man and the woman's place in the home. And I've got some family members. They're single family or single mother homes, and it's a huge problem. And so when you go into the church and you see it, there's 5 times more women here. A lot of those women are single parent households. They're doing the best that they can, because the man has just gotten up and said, "I'm done here," and I don't know how that happens. I don't know where. I don't know what happens to a man to say, "Okay, I'm giving up on my family here."
I don't know. I think you mentioned the 60s. Since the sexual revolution, there has been a growing element. At least I don't have an empirical study on this, but if you just talk to guys in general and listen to what they're saying, if they're honest with you, they'll say, "You know what? I've been told I'm not needed. I'm not needed in the home. We're not sure why anybody needs men." And I'm starting to wonder if that hasn't spilled over into the church.
I think it absolutely has. I think, again, since the 60s, women have proven that they can successfully navigate almost all areas of men's careers.
Yep.
And then men are told we need to match women in areas of emotional expression and all kinds of other
we
things.
Can't.
And we can't.
I'm not doing
to get
that.
in touch of our feelings, but I think we're avoiding the unique gender capabilities that God gave us for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And when we mix those gender roles and then there's confusion, we tend to check out, I think, faster than the women do.
Well, a lot of guys are giving up on marriage altogether, saying, "What's the point?" I mean, that'd be another show, wouldn't it? Well, men in marriage, but in church, definitely sometimes you get the signal, not a conscious signal. Nobody's standing up front saying we really don't need men around here, but the underlying thing, if all the values are feminine and we're being encouraged to do things that we consider feminine, the signal that we're getting is, "Well, I'm not really needed here. There's nothing here for me." Have we made Jesus feminine?
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And he wasn't. I mean, he expressed his character in many, many aspects, but they weren't all feminine.
I mean, God obviously expresses both sides. Male and female, he made them in his image. And so God himself has both. But ever since the 1800s, Victorian time, what do you see Jesus? Jesus is always with little kids and hugging a lamb. And you never, ever see those bits where he's going into the temple and driving out the money changers, or calling, you whited sepulchres. He's taken the Pharisees on in very aggressive terms. And but I think that we've got a feminine Jesus who exemplifies a mother maybe more than a father, or am I wrong?
Absolutely. I think you have a situation we talked earlier about being brave. You should have to be brave to be a Christian. And when you take a look at what Jesus did when he was walking here on the earth, in his own actions, he was incredibly brave to go against everything that was going on in his time and to live his faith.
I'm a preacher, and I make appeals to audiences, and I have, preachers typically have some not very masculine traits. We love talking, and we don't mind hanging out I'm an introvert, so I don't like hanging out in big groups, but we tend to have more of the female traits because ministry kind of became that way anyway after the 1800s. And I've noticed something. When I make an appeal to an audience, if I say, "Hey, join the church, wouldn't you like to belong?" I get a more female response than when I say the church is supposed to be a movement that changes the world. When are you going to step up and take your place? Suddenly the guys start responding to it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't want to belong.
Yeah.
Well, you're laughing, but it's true, right? We get challenged. Come and belong. Be in a community.
No.
No thanks.
No, we want to sign up for boot camp.
Yeah, I agree. You had a thought, Joel.
Well, it's interesting, church seems to it doesn't attract the high achievers, the alpha males, the risk takers. A lot of the men in church were raised in the church, so they're comfortable coming every week. But how do you get these male, the typical male, they don't always feel like they belong in there. But you look at the Bible, and you look at who are the heroes of the Bible. I mean, these guys were lions. Paul and Daniel,
Samson,
and
David.
Gideon. I mean, man, the stories there. These guys were going out and they were spilling blood. They were
lots of blood.
We have a proposal for a new church service. Slay the heathen.
David's mighty men of valor.
Yeah, and that we get that. It's like, oh yeah. I mean, even when I got out of academy, the first thing I did was there's lots of different words for it, evangelist, colporteur, and that kind of connected with me. It's like we were in the field, we were knocking on doors. There was a call, there was a mission,
and you had a battle map. We're doing this neighborhood, then that neighborhood.
Yeah. That
goes back to those 3 locations.
And us guys,
about.
we were friendly competing here. Who was bringing in the most souls and selling the most books and things.
Is there room for competition in church? Because that does ring our bells.
It does.
2 guys pull up to a stoplight at the same time. If they make eye contact,
Right.
You're already laughing because it's true, right? If we make eye contact, somebody's going to get to that next light first.
Depends on what vehicle I'm driving.
But is there room for competition in church? That's a dangerous one because, sometimes churches have said no football because of all the aggressiveness. Yeah. Got all quiet.
I don't know. I think it's how you define competition. If you're sitting there like Joel said, we passed out this many books or whatever. We went and helped this many people. Something you're able to quantify, not necessarily in a sports context or whatever. I think that's always good. You're encouraging people to try harder. That's why when you're raising money for your church, you put the thermometer up there so everybody can see where you're at, so you can sit there and go, we need to do better here.
Yeah, there you go. It's not necessarily competing against another church or another group, but that thermometer on the wall motivates me.
It's competing against your own map of success or your own mark.
What changes would you guys make? We've got 5 or 6 minutes left. What would a church that appeals to men look like? What changes would you make? Obviously, I don't think we're going to go all the way where women realize, oh my goodness, this is just a bunch of cavemen, and I'm not talking about putting big screen TVs in a Super Bowl party. Sometimes I think in an attempt to reach men, preachers overdo all the sports metaphors. It seems cheesy and trying too hard. But what changes would you make? What would a masculine, not a masculine church, a church that's inviting to men, what would that look like?
Well, I think from my perspective, actually, I've been in a couple of churches where they had a pretty good active men's ministry, and I've been in other churches where there was none. And when I mean active men's ministry, I mean the things that I would get excited about. And I think, number one, I would probably say let's start and maintain a very active men's ministry that has the right components again so that men can belong, they can do things that get them all fired up, and when they come back to their homes and to their church and their community, they actually have their own community. So the men have a community themselves, and once they've achieved and they've done those things and they've bonded, they're bonding in a church relationship environment. Men don't do that. So I think that bringing that back in is a powerful tool to, I think, keep men engaged at church. And then obviously getting them more involved with different functions in the church. And part of that for me, again, is for the church not to be inward focused, but outward focused. And what are you going to do to reach your community, to make a difference?
And there's a conquer motif there, too. And you find that in, Revelation 6. The early church is described as a white horse going out conquering and to conquer. Let's go take on. And the early church did it. They took the entire Roman Empire down. Paul was able to write that the gospel had been preached to every creature under heaven in one generation. And that was a conquer motif. That's what it was. You had something, Kyle.
I think, going back to... I know myself, I like working with my hands. And I think that if there were things in church where it was like, okay, let's learn some skills, some really applicable skills that, okay, once I learn these skills, now we have these programs that you can go out and use these things to help people, where they're at. You can learn the mechanic skills, you can learn the carpentry skills, the welding, all these different things that can help people very quickly, and you can see a lot of change. I measure lots of things in my life, and the faster you can see change, the faster I can see that I'm doing good for somebody somewhere. That's what gets me going.
You mentioned broken homes a minute ago. I can envision a situation where, hey, there's all these boys that don't have a dad role model. They don't have a male role model in their house. A good ministry program, at least for me, the appeal would be, hey, this kid doesn't know how to change a tire or change the oil. This kid doesn't know how to run a bandsaw. This kid's, that's something that I would be able to do. Hey, son, here's how you build something. Here's how you repair something. And I know we're stereotyping guys a little bit, but that would turn my crank. Hey, I'm actually making a difference, and I'm teaching masculine traits to the next generation.
Exactly.
Joel, what would you change?
I'm going to go back to what I said before. I think, and this is tied into church too, but, us guys, our personal walk with the Lord, the time we're spending every week, that's going to make a difference when we walk into church. And that's going to make a difference how involved we are in different aspects of the church. And I'm not talking about the pastor. I mean, 95% of the pastors are male. Okay, so that position's covered. But I think everything else we really need to step into more and help the women, because they're, like I said before, they're fielding all the classes for the children and so many other aspects. What if we did more of that? Because we had a strong walk in our personal lives, and the Lord was working with us through the week and impressing us what to do when it came time to go to church. And I think that would bring in more men because they'd be identifying with more when they came to visit.
And
I think the other aspect for me would be this. I mean, okay, so we've talked about church, what it is today, and I think actually far too often the pastor is shepherding the flock very carefully in his local congregation. You take a look at Paul, some of the disciples we talked about, they were itinerant preachers. They were moving on, conquering, as you said. And I think the whole church model isn't just a masculine-feminine issue, but I think the church model today should be changed. I think that actually more people should step up to the plate and have the service. Elders, more men should be involved with running and operating a church, and the itinerant pastor should come back.
I shouldn't even say what I'm about to say because there's 2 minutes left in the show. There's a world religion that's having no trouble attracting young men.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's Islam. And I'm not advocating the way that they do it.
No.
Because they're literally now I know I'm going to get in trouble for this, but there are some quarters of Islam where they're putting a gun in the kids' hands and saying, let's go conquer the world. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not suggesting that necessarily, but there's definitely something going on there that young men find appealing to the point where some are leaving Christianity to go become Muslims.
Because they want to stand up and do something. They want to be active. It's doing, not listening.
Yeah,
not being passive.
Well, we're down to 1:32, so let me make an appeal to the guys out there a little bit. I know, I've felt it, that church doesn't always feel like it's designed for you. However, if you were to take the time to open the pages of the Bible and have a look at it, you'll discover that God has something for men in His kingdom. There is a decided role. We are supposed to conquer. We are supposed to go out and make a difference, do something great for the kingdom of God. It goes right back to the marching orders of the first century church. If you look at Acts chapter 1, Jesus said, power will come to you. It's the word dunamos in Greek. It's dynamite. It's explosive power, so that you will go from from Jerusalem to Judea to Samaria to the uttermost parts of the earth. And there's still something in your heart if you look. There is something there, a spark in your heart to do something great for the kingdom of God. Many of you, if you were to close your eyes and think for a moment, what would I do for God if I knew I couldn't possibly fail? Something will drift into your thoughts. Something will be there. And my challenge to you is this. Don't wait for an invitation. Don't wait for the world to change. Step up and make a difference. Do something about it. Change the world for Christ. It's always been that individual who heard God's voice calling them, who stepped up and did something great and revolutionized the world. And they were never invited by a committee. They were never invited by the pastor. They heard God's voice calling them to be a Gideon, to be something great for the Lord. That could be you. So contact us at the Voice of Prophecy. We've got all kinds of study materials. Guys, it's time to step up and be men in the cause of Christ. This has been Disclosure.